I was wearing slippers when my son threw me out of my own home. Not even shoes. Just soft, worn-down slippers I'd bought 3 years ago at a pharmacy. I remember looking down at them while holding my old suitcase, rainwater creeping up the terry cloth like it was trying to pull me underground. Behind me, the porch light was still on, casting a yellow circle that didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. It was his house now, or so he said. His and hers. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not in front of them. They stood at the door like they were watching the trash truck miss a pickup. Amber crossed her arms, a folded dish towel in one hand. "You'll be more comfortable at that retirement place anyway," she said, like she was doing me a favor. My son, Jason, avoided my eyes. He looked at the floor and said, "We'll bring the rest of your things tomorrow. You shouldn't be living alone anymore." "But I wasn't alone," I said. It slipped out before I could stop it. I had them. I had my grandchildren. I had my books, my baking pans, my old quilt from the year the twins were born. I had my place, my corner of the world. Now I had a suitcase and no shoes. The cab driver didn't ask questions when he picked me up, just gave me a small nod and turned the heater up without a word. I kept my hands folded on my lap like I was still in church. As we pulled away, I didn't look back. Not once. The place Jason had arranged for me, just temporarily until we settle things, was a private care home on the other side of town. A room with pale green walls and a bed that smelled of antiseptic and starch. The kind nurse helped me in. "Mrs. Brady, would you like to call someone? Maybe your daughter?" I shook my head. No daughter, just Jason. And he had made his position very clear. When the nurse left, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, my slippers now dry but stiff. My fingers ached. My knees throbbed from the cold, but mostly it was my chest, like someone had hollowed it out and filled it with stones. I had spent 78 years walking this world. I had survived losing a husband, raising a child alone, running a bakery 6 days a week for 32 years. I'd written every check for every school trip, paid for his college, helped with the down payment on this very house. The house they kicked me out of. The worst part? I saw it coming, not all at once, not in some dramatic scene. It was a slow unraveling, a question here, a suggestion there. "You know, Mom, maybe it's time to consolidate the accounts. Wouldn't it be easier if we were co-owners on the deed? This house is so big for just one person." And I let them. God help me, I let them. Because I thought love looked like trust. Like saying yes, even when something inside me whispered no. The room was quiet, but my mind was loud. Replaying the moment when Jason said, "It's just paperwork." Replaying the time Amber locked the home office and said it was to keep things tidy. Replaying the afternoon when my name quietly vanished from the mailbox and no one said a word. I wasn't old enough to be confused, just old enough to be dismissed. At some point that night, I opened my suitcase. I had one dress, 2 cardigans, a zippered pouch of toiletries, and a blue notebook. The notebook was one I'd kept in secret, old habit from my bakery days. Names, dates, little observations. I flipped through the pages. March 4th. Amber asked about the life insurance policy again. Seemed irritated I hadn't updated it yet. May 12th. Jason brought over a financial planner, said it was just a conversation, but I was the only one who didn't speak. June 8th. Mail came already opened. Bank envelope inside. No explanation. The pages went on. I didn't know what to do with the rage. It was too quiet, too old. Not the kind that lashes out, the kind that settles in your bones and changes your posture. I reached into my purse and pulled out a business card. My friend Lorraine had given it to me months ago. "Just in case, hun," she'd said, slipping it into my hand like it was a tissue. "A lawyer. A good one," she'd whispered. "Deals with families. The kind that don't play fair." I looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight, and I knew what I was going to do in the morning. The next morning, I woke up with the strange clarity that only comes after something has broken beyond repair. There was no hesitation, no more excuses. I sat up in the stiff bed, put my feet into the same slippers that had carried me out of my own home, and reached for the small notebook. I didn't cry. Not now. There would be time for grief later, after the business was done. By 8:15 a.m., I was already in the lobby of the law office Lorraine had told me about. The receptionist gave me a curious glance, her polite smile faltering just a bit, when she took in my cardigan, my age, and my lack of an appointment. But when I handed her the card and said, "Tell Mr. Kramer that Marilyn Brady is here, and that I brought proof," her eyes changed. Within 5 minutes, I was sitting in a sunlit office across from a man in his late 50s with silver temples and a face that didn't rush anything. Mr. Kramer looked like the kind of man who didn't blink when people tried to lie to him. "You said you brought proof," he said, steepling his fingers. I opened the notebook and laid it on the table between us. Every date, every change, every transaction, copies of account statements, notes on conversations, and I have recordings too. "Recordings?" "I may be old," I said, "but I'm not stupid. My hearing isn't what it used to be, so I started using a recording app on my phone during conversations. For reference, you know. Then I realized I needed those files for a different reason." Mr. Kramer didn't ask me why. He simply nodded and began flipping through the notebook. "You wrote down everything." "I was the bookkeeper for my bakery for 3 decades," I said. "Old habits die hard." We spent over an hour together. I told him about the day Jason had brought over the notary, saying it was just to streamline the estate. I told him how Amber had slowly pushed me out of every shared space in the house, including the kitchen, where I'd baked every holiday meal since 1984. I told him about the day my name vanished from the property deed, how they claimed it was a clerical error that never got corrected. Mr. Kramer didn't interrupt much. He just took notes and let me talk, the way someone should have years ago. "I want to get my house back," I said finally. "But more than that, I want to stop pretending. They used my love against me. They thought I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't fight." "You have legal options," he said carefully. "Depending on the transfer documents and your mental competency at the time of signing, we can potentially challenge the deed, especially if there's evidence of coercion or manipulation. As for the financials, we may need to involve law enforcement." I nodded. "Then involve them." He looked at me for a long moment, then said something I didn't expect. "You're not the first parent to walk in here with a story like this." I swallowed hard. "But I want to be the last." By 11 a.m., we had a plan. Mr. Kramer called in his assistant, a sharp young woman named Dana, and began collecting copies of everything I had: the emails Jason forwarded, the joint account statements that showed money vanishing in chunks, the trust documents that Amber had insisted were standard procedure. As I waited, I looked out the window at the street below, people going about their lives. Nobody knew that 2 blocks away, a woman like me had just lost everything, but maybe not for long. "You understand this might get ugly," Mr. Kramer said when he walked me to the door. They'll try to paint you as confused, as unstable. They've been doing that for months already, I said quietly. This time, I'll answer back. Outside, the sun was bright, almost too bright. I squinted as I walked back to the care home, not because of the light, but because I could finally see clearly. Jason always said I didn't understand the modern world, that things weren't done like they used to be. And maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't understand how a son could look at his mother and see a bank account. But I did understand how contracts worked. I understood leverage. I understood timing. And I knew something else now, too. I wasn't alone. By the time I got back to the care home, Dana had already emailed me the first draft of a letter to Jason and Amber, demanding a full financial accounting. Mr. Kramer had submitted a request to freeze the accounts pending investigation, and a police liaison had been assigned to my case. That night, I slept like a stone. When Jason was 10 years old, he used to crawl into my bed after nightmares and clutch my arm so tightly I couldn't move. "Don't let go, Mom," he would whisper. "Don't ever let go." That memory haunted me as I sat in the care home's cafeteria the next morning, stirring sugar into a cup of coffee I didn't even want. He had begged me never to let go, and yet, in the end, it was him who had released me, shoved me, really, out of his life like I was nothing. But memories are funny things. They don't come alone. That one pulled others behind it, dragging me through the years, back to the beginning. Jason had been 16 when his father, my Robert, died in a road accident. A Saturday afternoon, sudden as a lightning strike. 1 minute he was fixing the garden fence. The next I was standing in a hospital corridor staring at a sheet pulled over his face. Jason cried so hard that night he couldn't breathe. I held him, whispering, "I'm here. You still have me." And he did. I worked double shifts at the bakery, then came home to cook, clean, check homework. I saved every dime I could, skipped new clothes for myself so I could buy him football shoes, a guitar, college applications. He was my boy, and he was all I had left. When he got into university, I sold my mother's jewelry to cover the first semester's books. When he married Amber, I wrote a check for the down payment on their starter home. When their twins were born, I gave up retirement for another 3 years to help pay medical bills. Every sacrifice felt like the natural thing to do. That's what love was. The first time Jason asked me about planning for the future, I didn't see it as a warning sign. He came over one Sunday afternoon, the kids running in the yard, Amber flipping through a magazine, and he said gently, "Mom, you should really think about putting things in order, so there aren't complications later." I laughed. What complications? My life is simple. But he didn't laugh back. "I mean the house, the accounts. You should make things clear legally. Maybe even transfer them early. It'll make probate easier." I remember frowning, not because I suspected anything, but because it sounded so distant. I was 68 then, still strong, still working part-time. I wasn't ready to be treated like a fading shadow. "Don't rush me into the grave, son," I said lightly. He grinned, embarrassed. "Of course not, Mom. I just want to help." That was how it began. Slowly, almost sweetly. Amber was the one who pushed harder. She started with little comments. "You really shouldn't be driving anymore. Isn't the house too much for you to manage? Wouldn't it be nice to have someone else handle the bills?" Always wrapped in concern, always ending with, "We just want what's best for you." And I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe them both. So I agreed when Jason suggested adding his name to my bank account. "It's just easier if something happens to you," he said. I agreed again when Amber suggested setting up a joint household budget. "We'll handle the online stuff. You don't have to worry about passwords," she said. I even agreed when they proposed updating the deed to the house. "Mom, it's only paperwork. Nothing changes. You'll always live here." Each decision by itself seemed harmless, logical even. But they were threads pulled from a sweater, and one day I looked down to find myself bare. The day I signed the new deed is burned into me like a brand. Jason came with a notary, friendly, smiling, sliding papers across the table. "It just streamlines everything, Mom," Jason reassured me. "Nothing at all changes for you." I hesitated, pen in hand. I even asked, "So this means the house is still mine, right?" "Of course," Jason said quickly. "It's still yours, just legally simpler." And because he was my boy, because I had promised his father I'd always look after him, I signed. I didn't understand then that I had just handed over everything I'd worked for, everything Robert and I had built. It was only months later, when my name quietly vanished from the mailbox, when Amber changed the locks by mistake, when Jason started talking about their house instead of ours, that I realized what I had done. I stared at my untouched coffee in the cafeteria. The bitter smell rose up and made my stomach twist. Love had made me blind. Trust had made me weak. And weakness had cost me my home. But now I had something stronger than trust. I had proof. It started with the kitchen. Amber began to leave her cookbooks on the counter, her spice jars lined neatly in rows, her own mugs in the cupboards. At first, it felt like sharing, a daughter-in-law making herself at home. But then she started sighing when I left flour on the table after baking, or when I cooked stew that smelled too heavy. One afternoon, I came in with a bag of groceries, potatoes, onions, a loaf of bread, and Amber was standing at the stove stirring something in a copper pan. She didn't look at me. "Oh," she said, "I thought we agreed I'd handle meals. It's easier this way." "We never agreed," I said softly. She turned, smiled with her lips, but not her eyes. "Well, Jason and I talked about it. You should rest. You've done enough cooking." I remember setting the bread on the counter. My bread. My kitchen. And yet, suddenly, it wasn't mine anymore. After that, small pieces of my life disappeared one by one. My favorite armchair needed reupholstering and vanished into the garage. The quilt I'd sewn from Robert's shirts went missing from the foot of my bed. Jason's excuse was always the same. "Amber thought it looked too worn. We'll get you something new." Even the garden changed. Robert had planted roses for me after our 20th anniversary, each bush a different color. Amber complained they were too messy and replaced them with decorative stones. And Jason, my Jason, stood by her side while she erased me. The first time I tried to resist was about my pills. My doctor had prescribed an expensive medication for my blood pressure. When I came home from the pharmacy, Jason frowned. "Mom, that's ridiculous. $300 a month? We'll find you something cheaper." "It's the only one that works," I said. "Still," Amber cut in, "you don't need to waste money like that. We'll manage it." Manage it. That was her favorite word. It meant control. It meant decisions made without me. I started keeping a box under my bed, receipts, letters, prescriptions, anything that proved what was mine. It felt foolish at first, like a child hiding candy. But something in me whispered, "You'll need this one day." That whisper grew louder when Jason took my car keys. "You don't need to be driving anymore, Mom," he said. "Too risky. What if something happened? It's better this way." Better for who? I wanted to ask. But I stayed silent. I watched as he drove my car away, to keep it in good shape. The next week, my debit card stopped working. Jason explained it casually, over coffee. We just consolidated everything into the joint account. Easier to keep track. Don't worry, I'll handle the bills. He smiled like he was doing me a kindness. That night, I sat in my room staring at the empty space on the dresser where my car keys had once been. I thought of Robert, of how he used to say, "Never let anyone else hold the steering wheel of your life." And I realized it wasn't just my car I had lost. It was my dignity. One Saturday morning, I found Amber in my bedroom. She was going through my jewelry box. "What are you doing?" I asked. She looked up, unbothered. "Just sorting. You don't wear these anymore. We could sell them, use the money for the twins' school fund." I grabbed the box, my hands shaking. "Those are mine." She laughed lightly. "Don't be so dramatic. We're family. What's yours is ours." The words chilled me. What's yours is ours. It was then that I understood. They weren't just managing things. They were taking them, piece by piece, until there would be nothing left. I remember standing in the garden that evening, staring at the bare patches where roses used to bloom. The air smelled of cut grass and damp earth, but all I felt was emptiness. I whispered to Robert, as I often did, "I'm losing everything." But I didn't know then how true those words were, because the house itself was next. The day the papers arrived, I thought it was a mistake. Jason came home with a folder tucked under his arm, his tie loosened, his smile too deliberate. Amber hovered behind him like a shadow. "Mom," he said, "we need to finalize some things about the house. Just signatures. Nothing changes for you." I felt a tightening in my chest. Signatures for what? "Legal clarity," Amber answered smoothly, sliding the folder onto the table. "In case anything happens to you, everything transitions seamlessly. No disputes. It's really just paperwork." I opened the folder. Lines and lines of print I couldn't make sense of. Property transfer. Beneficiary designation. Words that felt heavy but blurred together. Jason pulled out a pen and set it in front of me. "It'll just take a minute." My hand hovered. "So the house is still mine?" "Of course," he said quickly. Too quickly. "You'll always live here. This just avoids future problems." Amber leaned in, her perfume sharp. "Think of it as a gift, Marilyn. Peace of mind for all of us." I stared at the papers. I thought of Robert, of the two of us painting these walls when Jason was little, of the roses he'd planted out front. This was our life, our home. And yet my son, my boy who used to cling to my arm in the night, was urging me to give it away with a stroke of a pen. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to stand up and shout, "No, this is mine. I worked for this." But Jason's eyes, tired, pleading, a little impatient, made me falter. He had always been my soft spot. So I signed. Amber's smile widened. Jason exhaled with relief. The notary, who had been waiting quietly, stamped the pages and collected them. "See? Easy," Jason said, kissing the top of my head as if I were a child again. "Nothing changes, Mom." But things did change. Slowly at first. Subtly. Jason and Amber started referring to the house as our place. They moved my things from the living room to make space for their new furniture. They painted over the wallpaper Robert and I had chosen. One afternoon, I came home from the pharmacy and found my bedroom door locked. "Jason?" I called. He appeared at the top of the stairs, jingling keys. "Oh, Amber needed some space for storage. We're moving your room to the den. It's easier on your knees anyway." The den. A converted office with one small window and a sagging sofa bed. I stood there, clutching my pill bottle, feeling the house shrink around me. That night, I lay awake in the den, listening to laughter from the living room. Amber's high voice, Jason's low murmur, the television playing something I couldn't make out. My walls were thin, and yet I was invisible. Weeks later, Amber told me I should consider other options. "What options?" I asked. "Well," she said carefully, "maybe an assisted living place, with people your own age, activities, friends. We'll visit every week." Jason said nothing. He just rubbed his forehead and avoided my eyes. I looked at him then, really looked. And I realized something that broke me more than losing the house. He wasn't being dragged along by Amber. He wasn't trapped. He was choosing this. My son was choosing her comfort over my dignity. And from that moment, every kindness he showed me felt like a lie. The day I found my name gone from the mailbox confirmed it. Where M. Brady had once been printed neatly on a brass plate, there was now Jason and Amber Brady. My hand trembled as I traced the cold metal. I had signed away more than a house. I had signed away my place in the world. And soon I would learn just how far they were willing to go. It wasn't the house or even the furniture that finally broke me. It was the money. One Monday morning, I walked to the grocery store with my little canvas bag and my list: milk, eggs, flour, tea. Simple things. I had always managed my budget carefully. I wasn't rich, but between my bakery savings, Robert's pension, and the modest investments I'd made, I had enough to live comfortably. Or so I thought. At the register, I swiped my card. Declined. I tried again. Declined. The young cashier glanced at me with that half-apologetic, half-impatient look. My cheeks burned. I pulled out the emergency 20 I kept folded in my wallet and paid in cash, walking out with only the milk and tea. When I got home, Jason was in the kitchen. "Oh, Mom," he said when I told him. "Don't worry. We moved everything into the household account last week. It's simpler this way. I'll take care of the bills." "Jason," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That was my account, my money." He waved a hand. "Our money, Mom. You don't need to stress about numbers. Just tell us if you need something and we'll handle it." Need something. As if I were a child asking for pocket change. That night, I opened my blue notebook and wrote, September 14th. Account closed without consent. Told it was for simplicity. From then on, I had to ask. Every time. For toiletries, for clothes, even for the knitting yarn I liked. Amber controlled the debit card. Jason managed the transfers. "Just give us receipts," they'd say. One afternoon, I overheard Amber on the phone, laughing softly. "Yes, we've got access now, all of it. Investments, too." When she noticed me in the hall, she lowered her voice and walked away. A week later, Jason sat me down at the table. His tone was careful, rehearsed. "Mom, you've been so generous with us, and we're grateful. But it's not healthy for you to worry about finances, so we've set up a monthly allowance for you. Enough for small things. We'll handle the rest." Allowance. I nodded because my throat wouldn't let words pass. I went back to my den and opened the notebook. I wrote down every detail. Their words, their tone, the exact numbers Jason mentioned. My hand shook, but my handwriting stayed neat. The notebook was my only weapon. Over the next months, things got worse. I found Amber in my closet once, going through my coats. "These are too old," she said. "We'll donate them," without asking. I discovered my grandmother's ring missing from my jewelry box. Jason said, "Amber put it somewhere safe." But it never returned. They started locking the liquor cabinet, though I never drank more than a glass of wine at Christmas. They said it was for safety. The final humiliation came on a Sunday morning. Amber gathered the twins and said, loud enough for me to hear, "Grandma doesn't live here anymore. She's just visiting until she finds her new place." The twins looked at me, confused. "But this is Grandma's house," one of them whispered. Amber smiled tightly. "Not anymore." That night, I sat on the edge of the sofa bed with the quilt bunched in my lap. My chest felt like it was filled with lead. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to shake Jason and ask him how he could do this. But all I did was write. November 2nd. Amber told the children I don't live here anymore. Jason silent. Ring missing. Allowance reduced to $200 a month. My name gone from all accounts. I am a stranger in my own home. I closed the notebook, pressed my hand against the cover, and whispered to Robert, "I'm slipping away. They're taking everything." And though my voice was low, though the house was quiet, I swore I heard something inside me answer back, "Not everything." Because I still had the notebook, I still had my mind, and I was beginning to realize I would need both. The night they finally told me to leave was cold, with rain slanting against the windows. I had been knitting in the den, the needles moving slowly through the yarn, when Jason appeared in the doorway. He didn't sit, didn't smile, just stood there like a man about to read a verdict. "Mom," he said, "we've been talking. Amber and I think it's best if you move into a retirement community. Something with care staff, meals provided. You'll be happier there." The needles slipped from my hands. "Happier?" I repeated. "In a place where I don't know anyone? Where I'm put away like old furniture?" Jason winced. "It's not like that. You'll have friends your age, activities, and you'll be safe. We can't keep worrying about you here." I looked past him to where Amber was standing, arms folded, her lips pressed thin. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. "This is my home," I said quietly. Jason exhaled, impatient now. "It was your home. But things change. Mom, it's time." The words cut like glass. It was. Past tense. I rose slowly, my knees aching. "Where am I supposed to go?" Amber finally spoke, her voice too sweet. "We've arranged everything. Tomorrow a room will be ready at Maple Grove. It's a very reputable place. You'll love it." I stared at them both. My son, my daughter-in-law, the people I had fed, clothed, supported for decades, now telling me I no longer belonged under my own roof. For a moment, the room swayed. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Then I saw the suitcase by the stairs. Already packed. "Jason," I whispered, "you packed my things?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "It'll be easier this way." Amber handed me a folded coat. "You'll want this. It's raining." I wanted to shout, to tear the house down with my bare hands, but instead, I felt a strange calm wash over me, as if my anger had frozen into something harder. I took the suitcase. I slipped into the coat. And I walked out the door in my slippers. The rain plastered my hair to my face, ran down my collar. The porch light glowed yellow, but it wasn't mine anymore. Jason's voice called after me, soft, uncertain. "We'll bring the rest tomorrow, Mom." I didn't turn around. The cab driver barely glanced at me when he pulled up, but he must have seen the way my hands shook on the handle of the suitcase. Without a word, he turned the heater up. As we pulled away, I looked out at the house one last time. The curtains drawn. My roses replaced by stones. My name gone from the mailbox. It was over. At Maple Grove, the nurse led me to a small, sterile room with pale green walls and a bed that smelled faintly of bleach. She tried to be kind. Offered me tea, asked if I wanted to call anyone. No, I said. My voice surprised me. Steady. Flat. When she left, I set the suitcase on the bed and opened it. A few clothes, my toiletries, my quilt folded neatly on top. And at the very bottom, wrapped in an old scarf, was my notebook. I lifted it out, placed it on the table, and sat down. For a long time, I stared at the cover. The little blue book that held my life. Every slight, every transfer, every theft, proof of what they had done. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Midnight came and went. Still, I sat there, the rain tapping on the window like fingers demanding entry. And then, as the storm began to ease, I made my decision. In the morning, I would go to the lawyer. I would take the notebook, the receipts, the recordings. I would no longer beg for space in the home I had built. I would take it back. I closed the notebook, pressed it to my chest, and whispered into the quiet room. You wanted me gone, but you forgot who I am. I was at Mr. Kramer's office by 9 o'clock sharp, clutching the notebook to my chest like a lifeline. The rain had cleared, leaving the streets wet and shining. I stepped into the building with damp slippers and determination stiffening my spine. The receptionist looked startled to see me again so soon. Mrs. Brady, tell him I'm ready, I said. Minutes later, I was seated across from Mr. Kramer in the same sunlit office. He studied my face with quiet understanding. You've made your choice, he said. Not a question. Yes. My voice didn't shake. They put me out of my home last night. My son and his wife. They think I have nothing, but I have this. I placed the blue notebook on his desk. He opened it carefully, like a holy book, scanning my entries. Dates, details, conversations. He nodded. This is meticulous. You'd make a fine investigator. I was a baker, I said. I knew the cost of every bag of flour, every unpaid invoice. I learned long ago to keep records. Kramer leaned back. This changes things. With your testimony, these notes, and the financial statements, we can argue coercion, undue influence, even elder exploitation. The law is clear. Children do not get to strip their parents of assets under the guise of help. The word exploitation made my stomach turn, but it was the right word. What do we do first? I asked. Freeze the accounts, he said. I'll file an emergency petition today. We'll request that all assets in your name or transferred under suspicious circumstances be placed on hold until the matter is resolved. That includes the joint accounts they've been using. I nodded. Do it. Second, he continued, we'll file to contest the deed transfer. We'll argue you signed under pressure without full understanding. If successful, we can restore title to your name. The thought of my house back under my name sent a spark of life through me. And third, he said, lowering his voice, we involve the police. Financial Crimes Division. With the amount of money in question, this is not just a civil matter, it's criminal. Criminal. My son. My Jason. For a moment, grief rose in me like a wave. But then I remembered Amber's voice in my bedroom, saying, what's yours is ours. No mercy, I whispered. Kramer nodded. Understood. His assistant, Dana, entered with a stack of forms. Together, we went line by line. I signed affidavits, requests, petitions. My hand cramped, but I kept going. When it was done, Kramer closed the folder. "You've done the hard part, Mrs. Brady. You've decided to fight. Now, we take it from here." "Not all of it," I said. "I want to be there, every step." His eyes softened. "Then you will be." I left the office lighter, though the sky was still gray. Outside, the air smelled of wet asphalt and possibility. At the care home, I checked my email on the shared computer. There it was, confirmation from the bank that all transfers had been frozen pending review. I pictured Amber at the grocery store, her card declined, the confusion on her face. I pictured Jason's irritation turning into fear when he realized the money well had gone dry. I should have felt guilty. I didn't. That evening, Mr. Kramer called. "The police want to meet with you tomorrow morning. Financial Crimes Unit. They'll need your statement." "Will they go to the house?" I asked. "If the petition is approved," he said. "Yes. They'll serve notice. Your son will have to answer questions." For the first time in months, I allowed myself a small smile. After the call, I sat by the window of the care home, notebook open in my lap. The rain had stopped, and the clouds were breaking apart, letting streaks of light through. I thought of Robert. I thought of Jason as a boy clutching my arm after a nightmare. I thought of the woman in the kitchen telling my grandchildren I no longer lived in my own house. Tomorrow, I would no longer be silent. Tomorrow, the law would knock on their door. And this time, it wouldn't be me leaving with a suitcase. The bank lobby smelled of polished wood and paper, a mix of old money and nervous sweat. I had been here hundreds of times in my life, depositing bakery earnings, cashing checks for school fees, paying the mortgage Robert and I fought so hard to keep up with. But that morning, when I walked through the glass doors with my notebook tucked under my arm, I wasn't a customer anymore. I was a claimant, a fighter. The young teller recognized my name when I asked for the branch manager. Her polite smile faltered, and she disappeared into the back. Minutes later, Mr. Chen appeared. Tall, crisp suit, a man who had probably rehearsed charm in the mirror. "Mrs. Brady," he said warmly, "why don't you come with me?" His office overlooked the street, blinds tilted to let in slants of gray daylight. He gestured for me to sit. "We've received the petition filed by your attorney. I understand this is a delicate matter." "Not delicate," I corrected him. "Criminal." He studied me, then nodded. "Yes, potentially." I handed him the notebook, already opened to the most recent entries. They've drained accounts, consolidated funds without my consent, closed my card. I have records of dates, statements, even receipts missing from my files. Mr. Chen leafed through the pages carefully, his brow tightening. "You kept everything?" "I've kept everything my whole life," I said. "That's why my bakery never failed." He tapped the desk with his pen. "Here's where we stand. The freeze has been applied to the joint accounts your son was accessing. He'll discover today that he no longer has liquidity. Any attempts to withdraw will be blocked." I exhaled slowly. "Good. However," he continued, "we need to secure your long-term safety. I suggest establishing new accounts under a trust. Only your lawyer and you as trustee can authorize transactions. No family access, ever again." I hesitated. "Even Jason?" "Especially Jason," Mr. Chen said firmly. I nodded. "Do it." He typed quickly, entering data into his system. "We'll move your pension deposits here, transfer what remains of your investments, and—" He glanced at me. "I see you had significant withdrawals in the past 6 months. Large sums. Do you know what those were for? Amber's kitchen remodel, I said bitterly. Jason's business loan, private school fees, car upgrades. Every time they said they needed help, I signed the check. I thought I was supporting family. I was just fueling greed. Mr. Chen sighed, scribbling notes. That will help investigators, especially if the expenditures can be tied to their benefit, not yours. He turned the monitor toward me. Rows of transactions, each one a wound. $8,000 to a home improvement store, $12,000 to a dealership, $4,500 to a private club. My lips pressed tight. I remembered the day Amber told me I couldn't afford my medication while swiping a new leather purse across the counter. Mr. Chen cleared his throat. Mrs. Brady, once the trust is in place, your son and his wife will be entirely cut off. No more withdrawals. No more access. And the house? I asked. That's for the court. But the financial trail you've provided will strengthen the argument of undue influence. I sat back, feeling the weight of years lifting from my chest. Not gone, never gone, but shifting, as if someone else had finally picked up part of the load. When I left the bank, drizzle had started again. Faint drops against the sidewalk. People bustled by with umbrellas, carrying groceries, rushing to jobs. I walked slowly, breathing in the damp air. At Maple Grove, my phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls, Jason, Amber, even blocked numbers. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I opened my email. A message from Dana, Mr. Kramer's assistant, waited for me. Subject: Law Enforcement Coordination. Mrs. Brady, the police have scheduled to serve notice at your former residence tomorrow morning. They'll arrive with Mr. Kramer present. You are welcome to attend, though it may be difficult emotionally. Please confirm if you wish to be there. My hand hovered over the keyboard. Did I want to stand on that porch again? Did I want to look into Jason's eyes while the law knocked at his door? Yes. I typed a single line. I'll be there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the small armchair by the window, the notebook open on my lap. Outside, the streetlight glowed faintly through the drizzle. I read my own words over and over. Not everything. I still have the proof. Tomorrow, the proof would no longer sit quietly in my notebook. Tomorrow, it would speak for me. And Jason would finally understand that the mother he tried to erase still had a voice. The morning air was sharp, smelling of wet leaves and the faint exhaust of passing cars. I stood at the curb outside my own house. No, their house now. My hands folded around the handle of my umbrella. My slippers were gone. I had bought a sensible pair of shoes for the occasion. I needed to stand firm today. The police car pulled up first, a dark sedan with 2 officers inside. Mr. Kramer arrived moments later, his leather briefcase swinging at his side, his expression composed and unshakable. He greeted me with a small nod. "Are you sure you want to be here, Mrs. Brady?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "I want to see them hear it." The officers approached the porch, the steps I had scrubbed every spring for decades. The door opened before they even knocked. Amber stood there in a silk robe, her hair pinned back, annoyance painted across her face. "What is this?" she demanded. "Good morning, ma'am," the taller officer said evenly. "We're here to serve notice of investigation. Is Mr. Jason Brady at home?" Amber's eyes flicked past them, landing on me. For a moment, her face froze, then twisted into disdain. "So this is her doing," she said, "dragging police into family business." Jason appeared behind her, tie half done, looking like a man pulled out of bed too early. His face paled when he saw me. Mom? He began, then stopped, swallowing hard. This is official notice, the officer said, handing him a sealed envelope. Accounts connected to you are frozen pending review. Property transfer is under legal contest. You'll need to provide documentation and appear for questioning. Jason blinked rapidly, as if the words were a foreign language. There must be some mistake, he stammered. These are our accounts, our house. My mother. He faltered. She agreed. She signed under your direction, Kramer cut in smoothly. Under questionable circumstances. We have evidence. Amber's voice rose, sharp and brittle. Evidence? What evidence? She doesn't even know what day it is half the time. I stepped forward then, umbrella still in my hand, but my voice steady. January 17th, 2018, I said. You told me I didn't need to keep the receipts from the bank. February 2nd, 2021. You said selling my jewelry was for the children's tuition, but you bought a new car. July 11th last year. You stood in my bedroom and told me what's mine is ours. Amber's mouth snapped shut. Jason's eyes darted between me and the officers. Mom, please, don't do this. We're family. Family doesn't throw you out into the rain with a suitcase, I said quietly. The shorter officer cleared his throat. Sir, ma'am, you'll need to cooperate fully. Financial records, contracts, all correspondence. Failure to comply may result in charges. Amber bristled. This is ridiculous. She's just bitter. She gave everything willingly. I met her gaze, letting the silence stretch. No, Amber. I trusted you. That's not the same as giving. Kramer touched my elbow gently, guiding me back a step. The officers remained on the porch, speaking with Jason and Amber in firm tones. Behind them, I could see the hallway, my hallway, now lined with furniture I didn't recognize, photographs where my family pictures used to hang. My roses outside were gone, replaced with cold stones. It hurt. God, it hurt. But under the hurt was something stronger. Relief. For the first time, they weren't in control. Jason suddenly turned, his voice breaking. Mom, talk to them. Tell them you don't want this. We can fix it. Just come back inside. I shook my head slowly. I am not walking back into that house until it's mine again. Amber hissed. Ungrateful old woman. The officer straightened. That's enough, ma'am. We'll be in touch after the review. He handed Jason a second document. Do not attempt to move assets or alter property until instructed by the court. Jason's hand shook as he took it. When we turned to leave, I felt Jason's eyes on me, burning. I didn't turn back. I couldn't. Kramer walked beside me, his steps measured. That was difficult, but necessary. You did well. I gripped the umbrella tighter. My heart ached, but I felt taller somehow. As we reached the sidewalk, I looked back once, just long enough to see Amber slamming the door shut, Jason's shoulders slumping under the weight of the papers in his hand. For the first time since Robert died, I felt like I had done something he would have been proud of. And I knew this was only the beginning. The first interview with the investigators took place in a gray room at the precinct. A table, 2 chairs, a small recorder in the center. I sat with my notebook open, my reading glasses perched low on my nose, while a detective named Morales asked questions in a steady, patient tone. Mrs. Brady, can you tell us when you first noticed irregularities with your accounts? I didn't have to search my memory. I simply turned to the right page. September 14th. I went to the grocery store, and my card was declined. Jason later told me he had consolidated everything into the joint account. Here's the receipt. I slid the paper forward. Morales glanced at it, nodded, and clicked his pen. And before that, any warning signs? Plenty. My voice was calm, almost clinical. Amber pressured me about the deed. Jason brought a notary to the house. They said it was for convenience, but it removed my name. Then there were withdrawals. Thousands of dollars. Amber's kitchen remodel, Jason's business idea, private school. None of it for me. I kept track. Each time he asked, I had an answer. A date. A note. A piece of proof. I could see the respect in his eyes growing with every page. 2 days later, Jason and Amber had their turn. I wasn't there, but Morales told Kramer enough. They denied everything. Jason said I was confused, forgetful. Amber said I gave them permission for all expenses. They claimed I wanted them to manage things because technology was too complicated. Do you feel she was competent to make decisions at the time? Morales had asked them. Amber had laughed. Competent? She can't even remember to take her pills without reminders. When Kramer relayed those words to me, something inside me hardened further. They were trying to paint me as senile, a burden. But the records spoke otherwise. The handwriting in my notebook was steady, the dates precise. Even the bank manager, Mr. Chen, testified that I always came in alert and clear-headed. The first court hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. I sat at the long wooden table beside Kramer, my quilt folded neatly on my lap like armor. Jason sat across the room with Amber, both dressed in clothes I probably paid for. He wouldn't look at me. She stared like she was daring me to falter. The judge was a woman in her 60s, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. She scanned the petition, then looked at me. Mrs. Brady, I see here that you allege coercion in the transfer of property. Do you stand by this? I lifted my chin. Yes, Your Honor. I did not freely give away my home. I was pressured, misled, and eventually forced out. Amber jumped in before her lawyer could stop her. That's a lie. She begged us to take over, said she couldn't handle things anymore. She doesn't remember what she said. The judge raised a hand. You'll wait your turn, Mrs. Brady. For once, Amber's voice fell silent. Kramer presented the bank statements, the timeline of withdrawals, and my notebook. He spoke calmly, deliberately, never raising his voice. When he handed the notebook to the judge, she turned a few pages, her brows knitting. This is your handwriting, Mrs. Brady? Yes, I said. Remarkably detailed. She looked at Jason then, her gaze sharp. And you claim your mother is incompetent? Jason's lawyer tried to smooth it over, but the damage was done. When it was my turn to speak again, I looked directly at Jason. You told me once when you were little never to let go. You clung to me in the dark and I promised I would never leave you. I kept that promise. But when I needed you, you let go first. His face tightened, eyes darting away. By the end of the hearing, the judge ordered the freeze extended, pending further review. Jason and Amber were forbidden from accessing any of the disputed assets. A small victory, but one that rang through my chest like a bell. As we left the courtroom, Amber hissed under her breath, "This isn't over." I met her gaze without flinching. "You're right," I said. "It's just beginning." Outside, the air was cold, but it tasted clean. I wrapped the quilt tighter around me, feeling Robert's shirts against my hands, and whispered to myself, "They think they can outlast me. They don't know me at all." The court hearings dragged on, week after week, each one like a stone added to my shoulders. Some days I left the courthouse trembling from exhaustion, gripping Kramer's arm just to stay upright. Other days I walked out tall, carried by the quiet satisfaction of truth spoken aloud. But always, I went back to Maple Grove alone, until one evening when I returned to find a familiar figure waiting on the bench outside the care home. Grandma. It was Lily, my granddaughter, Jason's daughter. 14 years old, gangly in her school uniform, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her brown hair stuck to her cheeks where the wind had blown it loose. She jumped up when she saw me, eyes shining with relief. "What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised. "I took the bus after school. Dad thinks I'm at a friend's house." She bit her lip. "I had to see you." My throat tightened. I sat down beside her, my hands trembling. She reached into her bag and pulled out a paper sack. Inside were 2 sandwiches, still warm. "I made them," she said proudly. "Turkey and cheese. I know it's your favorite." For the first time in months, I cried. Not loud sobs, just silent tears slipping down my cheeks as I held the sandwich in my hands. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, brushing her hair back. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." She looked down. "Dad and Mom, they say you're confused, that you don't know what you're doing. But I don't believe them. You always remember my birthday. You always know what books I like. You're not confused." Her words were like a balm on an open wound. I pulled her close, smelling her shampoo, the faint ink of her school pen on her sleeve. "I'm not confused," I said softly. "I know exactly what they did. And one day, you'll see it too." She nodded fiercely. "I already do. Mom keeps yelling about money. Dad is always on the phone with lawyers. They blame you, but I know it's not your fault." We sat there for a long time, sharing sandwiches as the sun went down. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than anger or grief. I felt hope. Before she left, Lily pressed a folded note into my hand. "This has my number. Don't tell Dad. If you ever need me, call." I tucked it into my pocket like treasure. "I won't forget, darling." She hugged me tight, whispering, "I love you, Grandma." When she was gone, I sat in the twilight holding the empty paper sack, my heart both aching and full. The next hearing came, and I carried that love with me into the courtroom. Amber's lawyer tried to twist everything, painting me as manipulative, claiming I had weaponized sentimentality. But when I looked at Lily sitting in the gallery, eyes wide, chin lifted just like Robert's used to be, I found strength. Kramer leaned over at one point and whispered, "She believes in you. That matters." And it did. Because no matter what Jason and Amber said, no matter how they tried to smear me, I knew at least one person in that family still saw me clearly. That night, back at Maple Grove, I opened my notebook and added a line after the day's notes. January 14th. Lily brought me sandwiches. She believes me. She loves me. Proof that not everything is lost. The blue ink shone under the lamp, and I realized something simple but powerful. They could strip away money, houses, furniture. But they could not strip away love freely given. And that, in the end, might be the sharpest weapon of all. The final hearing was held on a gray Thursday morning, the kind of day when the clouds sat low enough to press on your shoulders. The courtroom was crowded. Reporters had caught wind of the case, calling it the Brady exploitation trial. I didn't care about headlines. I cared about truth. I sat beside Kramer at our table, the quilt folded neatly on my lap like a shield. Across from me, Jason fidgeted with his tie, eyes bloodshot. Amber sat stiff, her lips pressed so tight they were nearly white. The judge entered, her gavel tapping once. This court will now render its decision. I held my breath. She began with the financial accounts. After reviewing statements, testimony, and the meticulous records kept by Mrs. Brady, this court finds overwhelming evidence of undue influence and unauthorized withdrawals. She turned to Jason. Your mother's funds were used for personal expenses that provided her no benefit. The freezes will remain in place, and restitution is ordered. Jason's head dropped into his hands. Amber muttered something under her breath. Then the judge moved on to the deed. The transfer of the property was executed under circumstances that suggest coercion and manipulation. Mrs. Brady was assured her rights would not change, yet was later evicted from her own home. Such conduct cannot stand. My chest tightened as the words landed. Therefore, the judge continued, her voice clear and firm, the deed is hereby voided. Full ownership of the residence is restored to Mrs. Marilyn Brady. For a moment, the courtroom seemed to go silent, as if even the walls were holding their breath. Then the sound returned, papers rustling, gasps, the clicking of a reporter's pen. Amber shot to her feet. This is outrageous! That house is ours! The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Sit down, Mrs. Brady. One more outburst, and you'll be held in contempt. Amber sat, shaking with rage. Jason just stared at me across the room, his face pale and broken. But I didn't look away. I met his eyes and held them, not with anger, but with something colder, truth. When the hearing ended, the courtroom buzzed with noise. Kramer leaned toward me. Congratulations, Mrs. Brady. You have your home back. I nodded slowly. Yes, but not my son. He didn't argue. That evening, I walked up the familiar front steps of my house. The police had already overseen the return of keys. The locks changed back to my name. A locksmith had been waiting, drilling out the last traces of Amber's control. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The smell was different. New paint, Amber's perfume lingering in the air. But beneath it, faintly, was the scent of home. I walked through each room, my hand trailing along the walls. The living room was filled with furniture I didn't recognize, but the shape of the space was still mine. The den still held the indent of my sofa bed, though I'd never sleep there again. In the garden, the roses were gone, but I could almost see them blooming in my memory, Robert's hands planting each one. I stood in the hallway where Jason had once run, a boy chasing after a toy car, where he'd once hugged me after nightmares, whispering, "Don't let go." And I whispered into the empty house, "I didn't let go. You did." That night, I slept in my own bedroom again. I unfolded the quilt across the bed and lay down, listening to the quiet. It was not the same quiet as Maple Grove. It was the quiet of belonging, of roots sinking back into the ground where they belonged. For the first time in years, I dreamed of Robert. He was standing in the garden, dirt on his hands, smiling at me. "You did it," he said. "You came home." I woke with tears on my cheeks, but they weren't heavy tears. They were light, like rain after a long drought. The house was mine again. My dignity was mine again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like Marilyn Brady was whole. 2 weeks after the verdict, I sat in Kramer's office again, the same sunlit room where all this had begun. But this time, I wasn't clutching a notebook out of desperation. This time, I was here by choice. "I want to change my will," I said simply. Kramer adjusted his glasses, studying me. "Of course. Given recent events, that's wise. Do you have specific wishes?" "Yes," I said. Jason and Amber are to receive nothing, not a dime, not a chair, not a memory. They forfeited that when they tried to steal from me. His pen scratched across the paper. And the house? The house stays in my name until I die. After that, I paused, thinking of Lily's sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, her small voice whispering, "I love you, Grandma." After that, it goes to my granddaughter, solely to her. No interference from her parents. Kramer looked up, his expression softening. "Do you want to establish a trust in her name? That would protect her from outside influence." "Yes," I said firmly. "A trust. Enough to send her to college, to help her start a life. Money I worked for will build her future, not pad Jason's pockets." He nodded. "We can include stipulations. Only she can access it, not Jason, not Amber." I exhaled slowly, relief washing over me. For the first time, my assets weren't a chain dragging me down. They were a shield I could choose where to place. "Good," I said. "Make it ironclad." When the documents were drafted, I read every line carefully. My hands didn't tremble as I signed. I thought of Robert again, of the promise I had broken for so many years, to take care of myself as fiercely as I had taken care of others. Signing those pages, I felt like I was finally keeping that promise. Later that evening, Lily came to visit. She slipped in quietly after school, her backpack bouncing on her shoulders. I made us tea, the kitchen still carrying faint traces of Amber's presence, though I had opened every window to air it out. "Grandma, it feels different here," Lily said, curling up on the couch. "Like the house is breathing again." I smiled, smoothing her hair. "That's because it belongs to the right person now." Her eyes widened. "You mean you?" "I mean us," I corrected gently. "One day, this house will be yours. I've already made sure of it." She blinked, stunned. "But, Dad, your father has no say anymore," I said, quietly but firmly. "I love him, Lily. I'll always love him. But love doesn't mean blindness. He made his choices. And now I've made mine." Her chin trembled. She leaned into me, whispering, "Thank you, Grandma." We sat there together, the tea cooling on the table, the quiet of the house wrapping around us. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the world alone. That night, after Lily left, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom. The woman staring back at me looked older, yes, lined with years of sacrifice, loss, betrayal. But there was something new in her eyes, something I hadn't seen in decades. Strength. I whispered to my reflection, "You remembered who you are." Then I opened my notebook one last time. On the final page, I wrote, March 2nd, will changed, trust established, house secured, for Lily, for the future. Jason and Amber cannot touch it. This chapter is closed. I closed the book, placed it carefully on the shelf beside Robert's old photo, and felt a peace so deep it was almost silence. Tomorrow, life would go on. But it would be my life, not the one dictated by others. And when I was gone, the pieces I left behind would not be weapons in someone else's hands. They would be gifts given freely to the only one who still remembered me with love. The morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen table, warm and golden, chasing away the chill that had lived in the house for too long. I sat with a cup of tea, Earl Grey, the kind Robert and I used to drink together on Sundays. The steam curled upward, and for once I didn't feel like it was vanishing into emptiness. It was rising because there was still warmth here. The house was quiet, not the silence of exile when I was locked away in the den, unwanted. This was the quiet of belonging, of knowing that every creak of the floorboards, every faded mark on the wall answered to me again. My name was back on the deed. My accounts were secured. My will was rewritten. For the first time in years, my life was mine. The phone rang twice that morning, once from Jason, once from Amber. I didn't pick up either. Their voices had taken enough from me. Instead, I let the calls fade into silence. The answering machine clicked, then went still. I knew they would keep trying, maybe with anger, maybe with apologies. But it no longer mattered. Because the door they had slammed in my face, I had reopened and then locked to them from the inside. I thought of Lily, how her eyes had lit up when I told her the house would one day be hers. She had hugged me so tightly, I thought my ribs might break. That hug was worth more than every check I had ever written to Jason and Amber, combined. Love freely given, I realized, is stronger than love demanded. In the garden, I had already called a landscaper. The roses Robert once planted were gone, replaced with stones. But new ones would bloom soon. Red, yellow, white, the same colors he chose for me so long ago. I wanted the yard to be alive again, not buried under someone else's convenience. I took my quilt from the back of the chair and ran my fingers across the patches of Robert's old shirts. They were frayed now, worn thin in places, but still strong, just like me. I carried it to the window and draped it over the sill, letting the sunlight touch it. My reflection looked back at me in the glass. An old woman, yes, but not defeated. I whispered softly, "You kept your dignity." The words hung there in the air like a final truth. Later that evening, Lily came by again, bringing her laughter and her chatter, filling the rooms with the sound of youth. We baked a pie together, just like I used to do with her father when he was small. Only this time, there was no shadow of fear that the love would be conditional. As she left, she turned back at the door. "Grandma, you're stronger than anyone I know." I smiled. Strength doesn't always look like fists, darling. Sometimes it looks like saying no, even when it breaks your heart. When she was gone, I sat back down at the table with my tea. The house hummed around me, alive again, waiting for tomorrow. And I thought of all the women like me, mothers, grandmothers, widows, who had given too much, trusted too much, loved too much, only to be left with empty hands. If you're reading this, if any part of my story feels like yours, listen to me now. Do not let them take your dignity. Do not believe that age means weakness. Keep your records. Guard your name. And remember, you are worth more than the money they want from you. I lifted my cup, the tea cooling but still fragrant, and looked out at the garden where the roses would bloom again. It wasn't just the end of a battle. It was the beginning of my freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole.